Hi, Carrie.
Hi, thank you so much.
Welcome.
It's so cool to catch up and have a chat.
Yes. Welcome to BooB CamP.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
I've been on the other side. I've sat and listened to your BooB CamP lots of times. So
Yes. And I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep getting our health professionals in and giving these girls, the great information and sharing what we know, because we know that it takes about 17 years from the studies and the reports that are done to get through to our doctors, to our GPs, and then on to us. So we know that it takes so long. So we're happy to give that information earlier to people.
absolutely. I think we want to be ahead of the curve, really, don't we? In terms
Yes.
of, testing things out, trying things for sure.
Yeah. So what we're here talking about tonight is nutrition, okay, which you are an amazing nutritionist. And I love teaching. So for those of you in my BooB CamP group who have got this one's a little bit dirty, who have got my card, when you scan that card, you will find me talking about the importance of fats, carbohydrates, and protein. The biggest thing that I find in my clinic talking to my clients is they are not having enough protein and they are not having enough fat, and they are scared of having those two things. So we're really going to get down to the nitty-gritties of that. Carrie is going to offer you a super special to work with her at the end of the call. So please make sure you stay for that. I know 4 people out of my Body Wisdom group have jumped on already. I'm not sure how many people you're taking, but we will talk about that towards the end of the call. But now, what got you interested in the keto way of eating? Because to me, when I hear about keto, I just go, oh, I can't be that strict. I can't tell people that they have to be 100% in like that for forever. So for me to now listen to what you have to say, I'm like, I'm happy to share this with my group. And, I think that I could do it too.
Yeah. I think, when I first heard about keto, and it's been sort of, I guess around for a while, but really sort of hit a bit more mainstream of late as far as having people generally talking about it. But when I was in studying at university, it was like almost taboo to talk about keto, because there was sort of this underlying belief that it was all about just eating bacon and, butter and lots of fat. And it seemed so counter to everything that we had already talked about. And for many of us that grew up sort of 70s, 80s, 90s, we were very much about the Australian food pyramid. And it's now become a food plate, but, that food pyramid is really where most of us would have got our nutritional education from. And so, we knew that those fats were right at the top of the pyramid, and you wanted to avoid them as much as possible. And down at the bottom of the food pyramid, we had all the grains, and we had obviously our fruit and vegetables. And, we really tried to adopt that recommendation, because it really was the best of what we were being given at the time. And so when I was sort of exposed to this in the first instance, I sort of, probably a bit like you, Chelsey, it was like, what? No, that can't possibly be right. Why would people be doing that? And it was really more because as a nutritionist, I was working with people, and I work with people for all sorts of health concerns, but it seemed to me that people would come and they would say, oh, I'm here because I'm concerned about my, I don't know, XYZ, but my thyroid. Oh, and I want to lose weight. Or I'm concerned about my arthritis. Oh, and I want to lose weight. And really, I guess it just got to that point where I realized I needed to have something to offer them about weight loss, because it's we're still very much driven in society by a lot of these sort of societal expectations. And so people wouldn't come and say that was their first reason for seeing me, but it was certainly on their list. And I started working with a particular eating program to help people lose weight. And for many of those people, they had great success. And, they would come back week after week, and they would keep having losses, and they were like, champions of this. And, it was really interesting, because they were the ones that were having the losses, that were saying, oh, but I actually slipped up this week and I had this, or, I probably shouldn't tell you, but I went out and I had, I went out on a boozer, and,
Like confession.
Yeah. but they were losing weight. And then you would have these other people, it was about 10%, 15% of the people that would come back in. And these were the ones that you could tell they were being so honest in their saying, I am doing this 100%. They were, doing more, I guess, in a lot of ways, more than I would even have expected. And they were, after 6 or 8 weeks, they've lost half a kilo or a kilo. And my heart would just break for them because they were so desperate to lose weight. And these were often people that had a lot of other underlying conditions going on that they could just really do with a break in, in one of these areas to get some success to sort of motivate them to keep going. And it just played on my mind. Like, why is it that there's this percentage of these women that no matter how hard they try are just not losing weight? And then I had a client come in and who was doing this weight loss program and said, I've just been reading this information online about this condition called lipedema. And I thought, well, I've actually never heard of what you're talking about, but please tell me more. And she went on and explained some of the symptoms of lipedema. And she said, I have every single one. It was like she was tick, 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 tick. And so together, as I worked with her, and I what happened is I started to recognize these same symptoms in other people. And I started to say to these women that weren't having the same amount of success, do you find that, your legs, do they hurt? Does it hurt when people touch them? Do you get more bruising than other people? And they would be like, yeah, I've always thought it's so weird. Why do I have more bruising? Why if my grandkids come and sit on my lap, am I just about jumping out of my skin? Whereas other people can obviously, enjoy that experience of, cuddling their grandchildren. And then I had some start to say, again, I had these lumps under my skin, and it just really fitted what I was learning about lipedema. And so I did a real deep dive into it, and I really wanted to understand more about the underlying drivers of these conditions and what we could offer women that had tried so many other things in the past with little success. And so then I sort of jutted up against my own thoughts about, I'm not sure about keto. It's kind of not really what I would particularly be recommending, and the success that women were having with this. And I just felt like maybe I need to let some of those preconceived ideas go and really just experiment in it, step into this, support these women to have a go with this particular way of eating. And I say women because predominantly lipedema occurs in mostly in women, but, it was helping these women to step into this, very foreign way of eating where they're turning that food pyramid on its head.
And they try so hard, right? They try so hard.
And I think that's where it's just so, I guess, has been so discouraging for these women that they have tried so hard. In fact, they are probably trying 2 or 3 times as hard as other people and having, a quarter of the success. And so that adds a whole nother level of discouragement for these women that are already experiencing all of these other, symptoms that go along with this. So I started to work with women using a ketogenic diet. I actually at the same time went, well, if I'm going to say to other people, how are we going to do this? I need to do it myself. And, I guess I sat back a little bit smug and thought, well, I could probably do with losing 2 or 3 kilos, but I don't have 20 or 30 kilos to lose. I don't even know what it's going to do for me. But wow, I within about 2 weeks of eating in this way, my hot flushes had gone, and I'm, in that transition stage. I was sleeping better. My energy, I just felt like, I had so much up and go that I thought to myself, wow, maybe some of the underlying things that a ketogenic diet can help were actually going on for me, even though I guess I thought I was healthy, but maybe I had some blood sugar dysregulation going on, not to a point where a doctor would diagnose it as something, but there was certainly some underlying biochemical things that were going on and I've now done it for a long time and I feel great. And so, coming from a position of being concerned about these women, and I think that's also a group of women that are very underserviced by our medical system. These are the women that have been told just, keep exercising, eat less, do this, do that. They're sort of shoved from one place to another to try and get help. And then each time something doesn't work, it feels worse. And so I've just become really passionate about sharing this message because many women that even might read online and think maybe I have lipedema, then they read, well, what can you do? And they may then hear that keto can help, but it's like they would then jump online and become bamboozled by the amount of information, by the amount of conflicting voices out there, that one will say this and another will say that. And it just, I've had a couple of women say to me, I just threw my hands in the air and went, too hard, can't do it, don't know what to do, don't know what to eat, don't know how to feed my family. Yeah, it might help when I get my head around it one day, I'll do that. And I really just wanted to be the person that could, you know, that they felt like there was someone in their corner.
Yeah. We've got ladies online saying so true.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got some slides there that we're going to run through and do a little bit of education.
Yeah, I thought we might just kind of cover some of the definitions just so that we all know what we're talking about. I'm just going to make sure I can share my screen. Let's see what we're doing here.
Look at us.
Okay, so we're going to be talking a little bit about how a ketogenic lifestyle can help support people with both lipedema and lymphedema. So as far as the definition goes, I guess people that already experienced this condition absolutely know, you know, what it's about, but there may be some people on the call that, you know, are just interested in this, but don't really necessarily know what it is. So lymphedema is a fluid retention condition that presents as swelling in the tissues. This can be a result of surgery or cancer treatment, or some people just have it and there's no logical explanation. We do know that trauma in certain, you know, parts of the body can precipitate it too, because it damages the lymphatic flow. But people that have got this have often just been told this is just a situation that we manage. We, you know, do things like lymphatic drainage, compression, decongestive therapy. We might be using Chelsey's gloves, which, by the way, I love those gloves. It's to me, it's doing that feels like me time. I'm doing something for me. So thank you so much for, you know, offering those as something that we can now get here in Australia. But, you know, for women with lymphedema, it's just about management. And it's really only
told, you know, so many ladies have been told that there's nothing that they can do, that they're going to keep that hard, you know, that really full legs, those heavy legs, that the tissue is going to stay so, you know, so rigid, and then we're bringing that tissue back to life. Okay? Yeah, we might not be reducing the legs back to normal, but we have had people have the reduction in the legs, but we're bringing that tissue back to life. I love it. So happy. I get every day I get sent photos and messages of people saying, oh, look at this, I've been told I can't do anything or nothing will help, but have a look at this and this is how I feel. So I love it.
It's so heartwarming, isn't it, when people kind of have these wins when they've been told maybe there's not going to be a lot of wins. And of course, you know, when you have a condition like lymphedema, then you're more predisposed to some, you know, other issues. You know, there's cellulitis, there's, you know, arthritic conditions in the joints because of, you know, the extra burden that's placed on those joints. So not only are they told there's nothing they can do, but they're often kind of then said, and by the way, you're also going to have these other experiences. So, you know, in terms of nutrition, it's really only been recently that the role of nutrition has sort of been researched in terms of conditions like lymphedema. Because there was these other manual therapies and things that people were doing, it was really considered that, you know, diet and nutrition and even lifestyle didn't really play such a huge role in these conditions. But, you know, what I can tell you is that certainly the way that you eat and the sorts of ratios of the way that you eat can make a difference for this. Lipedema is a very different condition, but ultimately they can coincide. So lipedema is, we call it an adipose tissue disorder, and it's characterized by symmetrical enlargement. So lymphedema is often like one limb, but lipedema, you would find you would end up with both limbs looking the same. You get areas of enlargement. Often for women, it's in the lower half of their body. So we'll get like those saddlebags, you know, the big bum, you know, it can affect our lower legs as well, but tends to leave the feet totally alone. So you get this situation where you have these really thick legs and these tiny little feet. And just as an aside, probably one of the other things that really intrigued me when my client came to me and talked about lipedema is I started to see this in my own family tree. You know, I have a great grandmother that my only memory of her from being, you know, I was only very young, is she had these crazy big feet, so crazy big legs and these tiny little feet. And I always, as a kid, thought, how do those little feet keep her up, you know? And so once I started to see this and understand more about this condition, I could see, you know, it was, you know, there's many variations of this, and many women experience this without actually knowing what it is. So it's colloquially referred to as a painful fat disease. So yes, one of those conditions is that these fatty deposits are actually very uncomfortable. The skin bruises very easily, and just the slightest sort of bang, you know, that you may bump into something, you're going to really experience it. You're really going to know about it. And what I found most, I guess, in some ways alarming is that the statistics suggest that up to 11% of women experience this. You know, that's, you know, more than 1 in 10. And
it's more than that, because so many ladies do my course or out of BooB CamP, and then they go to their doctors because they just live with it and they've got no idea, because they just think they're fat.
Yes.
I'm just fat. And they don't know that they have it. So I think that number should be more around, you know, more towards 15 easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I would have, you know, just based on the people that I put through my previous weight loss program, that was kind of the statistic that I would have considered it to be. And I think, you know, because this isn't well recognized by the medical community here, many women go undiagnosed. They do go to the doctor, like, you know, I don't know what's going on. I'm exercising, I'm eating well, but I just keep putting on weight year after year. And so they tend to kind of blame themselves. And yet what we have to appreciate is there's a genetic component to this. And there's also a hormonal component. And, you know, based on the last piece of this slide, we know that there's some times in women's lives where this can just kind of dramatically snowball. So puberty, when hormones start to change, can be a time of issue. Pregnancy can also be a time of issue, and not just during the pregnancy, but in that time post-pregnancy, as the body's sort of adapting back and the hormones are sort of shifting again. And then menopause is another key time when this can start to sort of, you know, manifest more dramatically than maybe at other times. And of course, these are all times of great emotional upheaval and, you know, all sorts of other things that are going on as well. So I just wanted to, you know, I guess throw this out there. And, you know, when we think about being a teenager, we know that there's some things that go on as those hormones sort of really kick in, pregnancy, you know, menopause. I know this woman doesn't really look menopausal, but I'm figuring she's having a hot flush. It was the best picture I could find. She's like, help. And of course, we know that there's hormonal fluctuations in the female hormones, you know, estrogen, progesterone, but particularly estrogen. But what's really interesting is the research that shows that these are 3 key times when there's blood sugar dysregulation as a particular driver of some of the things that are going on. So some of that hormonal acne is actually a reflection of some blood sugar imbalance that's going on, not to the point that someone would be diagnosed with prediabetes, diabetes, but just that the insulin's starting to mess around and the blood sugar is starting to be a concern. So my question is there a connection? We know that female hormones are going to be involved, but to me, this whole, you know, what's going on with the blood sugar is a very interesting kind of conversation and connection there. So going on with, you know, women with lipedema, these are the women, like I said before, that have just, you know, been at the gym, they have been watching, they have been on every diet that they can, you know, come across. And they're women that, you know, will sit down in my clinic and start listing, you know, all of the different dietary regimes that they've followed during their life. And really at the end of the day, they've said that none of them work. You know, they might lose a couple of kilos here, but then they put more on after they've, you know, finished doing that. So, you know, that's a sort of an obvious manifestation of this, that, you know, it's no matter what you do, women haven't had a lot of success. And whilst we know that lymphedema and lipedema are different, they can coincide as that lipedema, those fatty deposits, start to put pressure on the lymphatic system where the lymph can't flow freely. You end up with both of those conditions happening at the same time. And that, you know, that's sort of the end result, but it can be really, you know, like just a double whammy of just so much going on at the same time. And what's also important to understand with lipedema is often there's other conditions that are going on as well. We know that there's often subclinical thyroid issues going on. So these are the women that have gone to the doctor and said, could it be my thyroid? They do the blood tests and get told, no, your thyroid's fine. But when we do more extensive testing, we can see that there is something going on here. And thyroid, is involved in metabolism. So we need to kind of look at this. We know that there's a hormonal imbalance where we're, assuming that insulin is playing a role in the impaired blood sugar, fluid retention, and also this joint pain that goes along, osteoarthritis, because of all of these conditions that are going on. So it's just a really challenging type of situation for people to be experiencing, and then they're not getting the support that they need, because some of these women will go to their GP with all of this paperwork and say, could it be this? And the doctors have never heard of it. I've never heard of it as a nutritionist. And if I haven't heard of it, the doctors haven't heard of it, then many of these women feel like, well, is it real? Is it a thing? And they don't know where to turn next. So I guess I throw out the question, can nutritional advice help? And I think up until recently, the general idea is that no, there's not really much that you can do. Dietary interventions don't play a whole lot of, they don't give a lot of benefit in this. And women will often be told, just, keep going with the calories in and calories out. Just, and I've sat in appointments and heard people sort of almost break down in tears being told, I've just been told to eat less, but do you know what? I eat like a bird. How can I be putting on kilo after kilo when I eat a quarter of what everyone else in my family does? And yet they're told, eat less. I think we actually have a bigger problem in a lot of areas that women are under eating. And I'm not saying that's true for everyone. And I think you mentioned right at the beginning, Chelsey, that concern that maybe women are under eating protein, we're under eating fat because of the way that we've been taught to eat in the past. And then we just tend to follow those same sort of dietary recommendations. But what's great is that over the last 5 to 7 years, there's been this growing body of women who have tried low carb ketogenic diets and have found improvement. In fact, in 2017, there was some research done, and what they were finding is that women were experiencing weight loss, often for the first time that they were actually experiencing weight loss, and a loss of limb volume. So like you mentioned, maybe you're never going to get that that situation where the limbs come back to exactly how they were before, but any pressure that we can take off the lymphatic system is going to have a huge benefit now and into the future. It'll stop a lot of the progression of some of these things. And the reason that we now have to consider dietary sort of interventions is that we can think of those drivers for these conditions and think, what dietary regime is going to help these? So we now have the evidence that show that lowering daily carbohydrate intake helps insulin resistance, it helps blood sugar balance, it leads to a situation of ketosis, and that's where the name keto comes from. But ketosis is where the body actually has two different ways that it can get energy. One can be from burning glucose, which is from the carbohydrates that we eat. The other way is that the body can burn the fat. And when it does that, it makes ketones. But ketones are anti-inflammatory. So if you have a lot of inflammation, which is common in these conditions, just moving over to eating a more like a fat-fueled diet rather than a carbohydrate-fueled diet, you are going to make more ketones, which is going to bring down your level of inflammation. We know that this way of eating can balance female hormones. We also know that by eating more dietary fat, we actually loosen up the lymph. If you think about the fact that for so long we were told eat low fat, and we were eating low fat yogurt and low fat this and low fat that, could it be that just we were so paranoid about avoiding fat in our diet because we were told at the time, you eat fat, you get fat? We were so paranoid about avoiding fat that we've actually in some ways created some of this problem, that our lymph is far more stagnant than it should be, because that eating the fat in the diet actually, makes it more fluid, and it can easily get around all of those little vessels that it needs to get around. So really important, I guess it's a bit of a mind shift to think, okay, I need to eat more fat. But one of the things that I would say, and I think I just want to sort of, there's a bit of confusion out there. Many people that talk about going on a keto diet, they think it's all about fat. But I would say it's not all about fat. It's about lowering the carbohydrates and incorporating fat where it's a logical way to have it in the diet. So I'm not a massive fan of, just eating fat for the sake of eating fat. But if it's logical and it's included in whatever food you're eating, like healthy avocados, making your own salad dressings with healthy oils, eating a little bit of, that meat that's got a bit of fat on it, because let's face it, the fat tastes really good on that. I don't think we have to be as concerned about those things as we were in the past. I have a little bit of a picture, and I guess I'll let you jump in, Chelsey. Maybe I'm just talking too much, but
this is going to be my next question. Is that when you're talking about insulin, can you explain a little bit more about that for the ladies? Because they might go to the doctor and the doctor's going to say, oh yeah, it's fine. My mum didn't know that she was pre-diabetic. If she kept on going as she was going, until I looked at her blood test and said, oh, hang on, let's have a look at this. And she said, oh, but the doctor said it's fine. I'm like, no, check out this, this, and this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that all the time as well. I think when we go to the doctor, we only get told there's a problem once it is a problem. But I'm very much about, how do we avoid it becoming a problem? So I like people to know what's going on with the insulin, even if they don't think they have any blood sugar dysregulation. But what happens, say, for example, up at the top of this picture, you have a piece of cake. By eating a piece of cake, and it's not only cake, eating a banana is going to have a similar impact. Eating a bowl of rice is going to have a similar impact. All of those carbohydrates turn into sugar in the body. The body needs to deal with that sugar. At any given time, we can only have about a teaspoon worth of sugar in our whole circulatory system. And so the body has to get this sugar out of the food that we're eating and do something with it. And so the blood sugar rises in the body, but once it gets to a certain point, our body's like, and our cells are like, hang on, that's getting too much. It'll send out insulin from the pancreas to actually escort that blood sugar into the cells. And that's what we want it to do. The blood sugar gets inside the cells then burn it as fuel, and, we're happy and we have energy and all is well. If we're eating lots of those things, the blood sugar rises a lot more, the insulin level gets higher and higher. And if you come to this little picture down here where it says insulin resistance, there's actually a picture of an ear with a line through it. It's a bit cryptic, I know. But as our insulin just gets higher and higher, because it's dealing with this problem all the time, the cells get to the point where they're like, almost stuff you. I'm not listening. I am just checking out. I'm not doing what you want me to do anymore. And so that insulin level,
I'm underpaid.
Yep.
I'm not letting any more in. I am done.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where we then end up with a condition called insulin resistance. There's a whole lot of symptoms that go on with insulin resistance, fatigue being one of them, but there's many, many issues that happen with insulin resistance. And you can have insulin resistance for 10, 15 years before you actually get told by the doctor, oops, you have a blood sugar issue. But even during that 10 or 15 years, you are starting to reap the side effects of that high insulin. It has impact in the cardiovascular system. So, you can end up with all sorts of heart issues. You can end up with, issues in your eyes, all sorts of things. I mean, there's a list of probably 20 or 30 different things that can happen way before you end up with a diabetes type situation. But what happens in this cycle is often once we get a little bit insulin resistance, and obviously there's degrees of this, we feel fatigued, we just feel a bit crap, really. I guess the only way to explain it. And then our brain's like, well, how about you just go and have some carbohydrates? It's like, I know that food will make me feel better, so we eat something. We don't tend to make the best choices because we're exhausted. And that just keeps this cycle going round and around and around. So the way that the low carb or ketogenic diet helps with these conditions is it stops the cycle up at the top. If we're not eating these things, we're not getting that rapid rise in blood sugar, our insulin resistance settles down and we become a little bit more insulin sensitive. And so that we can sort of stop this cycle from just going around and around and around. So does anyone have any questions at this point? If I sort of explained this in a way that's
amazing. Yeah. So I just teach that insulin is like the bus that picks up the sugar, to take it into the cell, and then those little receptors are there waiting for it. But when they've had enough, they're like, no, I'm inflamed, I'm done. And then the insulin can't get the sugar, can't get, and then the cell just says, you know, feed me more because I need some energy from somewhere. Yeah. So, and then it just starts off, and then you end up with all, you know, a lot of inflammation in your body and fat. Yeah,
and it just becomes such a vicious cycle. And that's the challenge in all of this, that it becomes such an issue. And, you know, if you think about that in terms of once the cells become insulin resistant, those receptors, you know, get a little bit, you know, jacked off. They don't do their job anymore. The cells can't function properly. No. And if you don't have healthy cells, you're not going to have healthy tissues. You're not going to have healthy organs. And you, as a total, aren't going to be healthy because we're only as healthy as our cells are. And so that's where, you know, whilst initially my reluctance to look at a ketogenic diet, I can really see how it's a great way to break this cycle. And ultimately, the benefits flow on, and not just in weight loss, but in all sorts of areas of health. So let me just see. I think I've just talked a little bit on this slide, and I've already sort of alluded to this research that's been done. Once they saw some benefits in lymphedema, you know, people started to say, well, if it helps lymphedema, could it help lipedema? And, you know, the research still needs to be done, but I think we want to be ahead of the curve. You know, it's, you know, is this going to help you? My experience says, yes, it can be of help, but ultimately the only way to know whether something like this is going to be a benefit to a person is by actually trying it. There's no test that you can do that's going to say, yes, you should do a keto diet. No, you shouldn't. It really is about testing out the waters and just seeing how you go. And what I found with my own clients as we've worked together with this is that they have started to experience weight loss for the first time in a long time. You know, that they just feel like finally they have something that they can do that is practical, that is relatively easy to do. And I know you said right at the beginning, Chelsey, that it seemed really hard, but actually my experience is different, that it's just about getting your mindset into the right space. You understand a little bit more about the theory of why this would work, and then it becomes much easier to do. We don't need to count calories, we don't need to be hungry, and we don't need to feel deprived. And that to me is an absolute blessing for many women who have been on this roller coaster for such a long time without having success, and they've, you know, could probably just about have an entire calorie counter in their brains. They know every single calorie in every single food they eat. They have felt hungry a lot longer than they would like to. And this is a way of eating. And not only do women that I've put through this program feel like they're finally losing weight, but we have all of these, what we call non-scale victories, you know, less cravings, better energy. They're able to kind of move on from that whole diet mindset where they've got to be focusing all the time on calories in, calories out. They're able to fall in love with food again. And some of that food is things like cheese and cream. Yes, you know, they are higher fat. We're not saying eat them, you know, as much as you want. I do initially sort of scale it back in, but they can eat these foods that they've avoided for a long time. Clothes start to feel more comfortable because the body composition changes. Even before the weight loss happens on the scales, they just feel more comfortable in their own bodies. And gosh, you know, what a blessing that is, to feel more comfortable when for a long time you haven't. Certainly less inflammation, less pain, less swelling. All of those things just improve people's quality of life, and they finally have some hope. Yeah. And that to me is the biggest thing, you know, have some hope that I'm going to try this. I'm going to see how it goes. I'm starting to have these little wins. Wow, you know, maybe this is something that I can do longer term. And the way that I encourage people to do a low carb ketogenic diet is probably different from a lot of other practitioners out there. There's so many voices in the low carbohydrate world. Some of them are just everyday people that have experienced it themselves and said, hey, I can teach other people this. Some of them are doctors, some of them are health coaches, naturopaths, nutritionists. My background is as a nutritionist, but I look at it in terms of there's a healthy way of doing this, and there's I can do a keto diet, but still eat all of the, you know, packaged and processed foods. I think we really want to keep the the essence of eating a healthy diet, but just look at the ratios of those healthy foods that we're eating and switch them around a little bit and just see how our particular bodies cope and experience, what benefits we get from that.
And we both agree that the one extra rule that we have to abide by is always choose foods that are on your hair test.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And we know that, this comes back to what I was saying before about healthy cells. The hair tissue, the hair analysis looks at how like a cellular response to these foods. So we certainly don't want to be doing anything that's going to be hindering our process. But I find, and I've had many women that have got a hair test result, and we're doing this with, we just look at both of them and go, okay, so this is what we're trying to do. This is the framework. These are your ideal foods. They might be different from the next person's, but these are the ones that are going to serve you. And what I do find is as we bring that level of inflammation in the body down, that also allows for many people to start incorporating some of those foods that were initially red foods back into the diet too.
Yeah, and that's the importance of doing your retest, because you get your hair test done and you might look at it and go, oh no, like mainly chicken comes up. Like
yes,
most of the time chicken, of course, comes up. It's like, so I've had chicken on my list for 2.5 years or something now. I think it's come off once and then it's jumped back in again on my hair test. But to see the difference in how your body heals, to be able then to add more food in, I can see that when I do people's retesting after 6 months. Then you would see it, because with your program you start pretty strict on the keto.
Yeah, I do.
Add foods in as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that happens in the keto world is that there's a lot of one size fits all type approaches, that it's like everyone that does this has to fit within this particular narrow criteria, like less than 20 grams of carbs forever. And, the reality is, as we heal the body, we have more flexibility.
Yes.
And what we ultimately want to have is metabolic flexibility, where we can eat carbohydrates, we can go for periods where we don't have carbohydrates, and our body can easily flick between. And that's, to me, the ultimate goal. And, when there's a condition like lipedema, I suppose, where there's inflammation involved, we have to bring it right back in the first instance. We need to kind of test this whole thing out, see how a ketogenic experience works for people. And that's what I tend to do now. I work through multiple stages where we dial it right in, and people kind of freak out a little bit and think, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? But then we're able to expand that out again and work out where every individual's carbohydrate tolerance is, because not everyone's going to find 20 grams of carbohydrates ideal. For some it'll be 50. For some that are more metabolically flexible, they may even be able to eat up to 100 grams of carbohydrates. But we will only know by dialing it right in initially, getting some sort of positive results. So we have like a really good measure of what works for you, and then slowly expanding it out and testing out. Someone might bring in, more nuts and seeds, and then their inflammation increases. And that's when we then say, well, okay, maybe let's leave nuts and seeds sort of till later on. Let's just bring in more vegetables at this point, or let's bring in more berries or something else, and just see how your particular body responds to that. Because ultimately we're all an experiment of one, and we have to be at that point where we can sort of get a sense of how our body responds to things, and that's going to be our barometer of what works for us and what doesn't work for us. So, circling right back to what you said at the beginning, your concerns about a ketogenic diet, I think they're very valid. If you just jump online and start reading stuff, you'll get told some crazy stuff. And some of the things just makes my hair curl, the things that people are recommending. But if we think about it in terms of how do I keep having a really healthy diet, but just consider how can I change the ratios of these food around, bring the carbohydrates down, increase the protein. I find protein intake is just vitally important. I'm just trying to think the last time I had someone sitting in my office when I looked at their food diary that I could actually say, I think you're eating enough protein.
Never, hardly ever.
Yeah.
So for the ladies that are watching now, we want them to get their weight in kilos and at least times it by 1.
Yeah. So if you times it by 0.8, that would be the bare minimum amount of protein your body needs just to do its everyday jobs. There's no leftover for better neurotransmitters or better, bone health or, better building of muscles. That would just be to maintain what your body needs to do. So
everybody get your phone, get your calculator now and times your weight by 0.8 and pop in here what is your minimum grams of protein. Okay, you'll be surprised.
Yeah.
And we'll see an average. So I like the minimum I like people to have in my group is 80 grams. That's like I said, let's just get to 80 grams. Most of them are 50.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is a lot of people don't realize that 100 grams of a piece of chicken breast or a piece of steak isn't 100 grams of protein. No. So you really need to get a bit of an idea of how much protein is in particular foods. And I even get my clients to track it for a few days. I actually have a handout that I'm happy to share with you, Chelsey, if you want to put it on your Facebook group and people can download that. That will give you just like a ballpark idea of just some of the general foods we eat, how much protein is in those. So you can just add it up for a couple of days and see whether you're getting remotely close to that 0.8. And that's the minimum. I even recommend if people are trying to lose weight, we're looking more at least 1.5 times their weight. And people often then go, whoa, there's no way I could eat that much protein. But we can be a little bit creative about it. You can put some of that protein into smoothies and other ways of getting that protein. It's about variety. It doesn't mean you have to eat steak for breakfast, lunch and dinner to get that protein. We want to be smart about having lots of variety in the diet too. But yes, definitely we want to make sure that people are getting enough protein. And naturally, as we increase our protein, we get some fats associated in those proteins. And then we feel fuller, so we're not so dependent on those carbohydrates. And that's sort of, I think, where some of the magic happens in this.
Okay, I'll just read through some comments. So Janice said, I had colon cancer. They removed 17 lymph nodes from my colon.
Oh, wow.
She put on a lot of weight and now just getting rid of it with using my sequence. So thank you, Janice. Jess, are the slides available offline? Yeah, we can put these slides into BooB CamP.
Sure.
And we can also add in your protein slide, info too. Cool. Odette, hello, darling. I love it. Now it's a lifestyle for her. Would a hysterectomy make lymphedema worse? Yes.
Yes.
The scarring and the, of the intrusion of what happens in your tummy. Yes.
And definitely the rapid change in hormones as well. Yes. For both of those can have a big impact. Yes.
Do you eat flaxseed, Carrie? And how much of it daily? So that's Belinda from last night from our...
Oh, okay. So flax seeds. So the way that I do it, as I said, I have a multi-staged approach. In the first stage, we actually don't include any nuts and seeds because we want to test those out and just see how the body responds to them. So we sort of dial it right in the early parts. And then, yes, flax seeds are one that we can include. Me personally, I react to flax seeds. So I don't include any in my day. But that's me and my biochemistry. For most people, flax seeds are awesome. It's a great way, both having them as the seeds and having it as flaxseed oil can be really beneficial. So, how much I think comes down to individual people's tolerance, but we can certainly, talk a little bit more about that at some other point. But it's about testing it out for you particularly and see how you respond to them.
Yeah. Yes, 0.8 is the minimum. So times your weight in kilos. So, I weigh 74 kilos. So 74 times 0.8. All right. So we've got some 70.4 for Alison. Hello, Alison. Yvette, 60, 52, 64. Great. Yeah, 56. Hey, Rosie. So, that is going to be your minimum grams. So, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So, to get 70 grams, that will be your minimum. So, Alison, to get 70 grams of protein in breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and realize that you can also incorporate this doing the intermittent fasting as well. So because the really good thing about intermittent fasting is that it helps the insulin resistance because it opens up this GLUT4 pathway on the cell, and that's going to help the energy get into the cell faster too.
Yeah.
So
and one of the great just talking, Chelsey, about intermittent fasting is we know now the science is really there about how beneficial it is to have periods of time where we're not eating. One of the great things that I love about eating in a low carb way is, going back to that slide I showed before about it breaking that cycle, you don't feel the same level of hunger when you're not eating the carbohydrates. The carbohydrates are the things that tend to drive that hunger cycle. And so intermittent fasting and all its benefits become easier. For many people, if they've been eating a lot of carbohydrates and they're told, oh, you should intermittently fast, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm not going to eat till lunchtime. By about 6 o'clock in the morning, they're ready to eat their arm. Their body just isn't well adapted to it. So this can be another way of really helping on so many levels to be able to do some of these other healthful practices.
Yeah, I bet if you start with the lemon and water in the morning and then just go and do something, I bet you can get through to 11 o'clock. If you get up in the morning and have toast, you're then going to want to have morning tea before you can have lunch.
Exactly.
Yeah. Take notice, really take notice of what you're eating. How often a week do you recommend intermittent fasting?
So my response to that, I would say as often as you feel like you can. I'm very much an advocate of, if you're not hungry, don't eat. Same. If you're hungry, eat. So, based on if you exercise one day, you're likely to be hungry at breakfast the next morning. So just follow your own body prompts. If you're hungry, eat. But on other days where, like you say, Chelsey, you just get up, you have a drink, or you have something, and then you can just kind of keep going, and you think, well, it's almost lunchtime, I may as well just wait for lunch. It's happened without you really having to put a whole lot of effort into it. It just naturally flows.
And when you are doing intermittent fasting, and counting your proteins, add them up over a week. So, hopefully I haven't lost you there. Add them up over a week, because some days you might go, you know what, and hormonally too, you might not even, I can get to 3 o'clock some days and go, I haven't eaten. I've been drinking my water and I've had, a herbal tea or something. It's like 3 o'clock. Okay. But other days I will wake up and I will want to eat 7 times that day. So, I will eat 7 times that day. But when I look over the whole week, it balances out.
One of the interesting thing that happens when we're intermittent fasting is we actually encourage the body to be in a process known as autophagy, where it does a whole lot of cellular housekeeping. And one of the things it does is it goes into the cells and sort of flags all of the damaged proteins, and it recycles them. And so in some ways, as we intermittent fast, we actually don't need as much protein as maybe we did when we're not intermittent fasting, because those recycled proteins can then get used for other protein needs in the body. So that's, again, another interesting thing, that you don't necessarily need to go, wow, I've got to eat all of this protein. Now I've got to fit it into 2 meals. Again, it's naturally just listening to your body, listening to when you're hungry and what you feel like eating.
Yeah. So fasting can be skipping breakfast, or it can be skipping dinner if that's easier.
Of course.
For you to do. It can be 2 days a week that aren't in a row, or it can be, that 16 hours. So depends, very individual. And that's what I like about what you do and what I do, because I'm not going to set the same diet for everyone. If somebody comes into our clinic and they want a diet, I'm not going to do it unless I've done the hair test. I will say to them, every meal, make sure you have a fat, a protein, and a carbohydrate every meal, because normally they're having cereal for breakfast, a salad sandwich for lunch, and then some pasta or some rice with some meat and veggies for dinner. And so what have they had? 20 grams of protein?
Maybe. Maybe not even that. Yeah.
So fat, protein, carbohydrate every meal. sticking to your hair test. I think, Joan, if you can pop the link in for the hair test, if anyone's interested to find out more about that. I do 400 of them a year with my clients, and then we retest as well. People will only maybe do like one retest and then 12 months later, because they see the improvements, they feel the difference. Then their family comes and does the same. It's, you know, choosing what individual foods work for you, number one.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And they're going to be different for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, except for I haven't had anyone come up with white bread is okay.
Yeah, that's true. Have you ever had anyone that's had chicken? I've not had anyone that's had chicken.
Yes. So some people are allowed chicken.
Oh, lucky them.
It's about 80% of 70 to 80% of people can't have chicken. And Colgate toothpaste, can't do Colgate toothpaste. Milk always, right? Milk always comes up, but then there is the selection of other things that you can have. Like it will say you can have the Liddells or the Zimmel milk or something like that.
And I love that sometimes, you know, it'll come back and say, you know, cow's milk's a problem, but you can have cheese. You know, a lot of people will think, oh, maybe dairy is a problem for me, and they'll cut out all dairy without realizing that maybe some would have been fine and some isn't. So it's nice that it sort of quantifies that and breaks those down so that you can see what's going to be of benefit to you.
Yeah, it's so much better than you go to someone, they say, oh, no dairy anymore, no gluten, no this, no that. But at least with this test, we're testing to get 600 different items. And it'll come up and it'll say goat's milk is okay. You can't, strawberries come up, 95% of the time? Strawberries are one of the main things. And at the moment, or onion also comes up. But, you know, at least you get a lot of yeses. And I think that's with your program, we're giving a lot of yeses. It's not just no.
Absolutely. Because I think, you know, one of the things that has happened is that we've demonized a lot of foods.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I guess I would call myself a foodie, but I'm not a foodie in terms of being able to create great food, but I love eating food. And we know that all foods have various different components in them. So we want to be eating the greatest variety of foods because, you know, this vegetable is going to have this particular type of phytonutrients and another one's going to have another one. And we want to be getting as many of those across the greatest period of time that we can. And so that's why, you know, when I do this with clients, I say, yes, we're going to bring it right in for a short period of time, but then we want to test out, you know, what can we bring in? Where can you still keep getting these gains? At what level does that work for you? And that may change over time too, but we just want to be able to expand that diet out to the point that people know the particular ratios and the way to eat, but they also have the greatest variety of different foods rather than being really limited and saying, well, I'm only going to eat these 10 different foods. Like that concerns me.
So talk us a little bit through your program.
Yeah, sure. I'll just flick through here.
So, keep going. Yep.
Oh, no, I think we've already talked about the things that were on those slides anyway. So I guess the one thing I say is the only way you're going to know that whether a low carb approach helps you is by actually giving it a go. And so what I've put together is a 6-module educational program where, you know, every week you get another module. They're about an hour and a half of, we do a deep dive into the theory as to why we're doing this, but we also, I think it's really important that we talk about the practicalities of it. You know, if you're a busy mum with kids, or you're working long hours, you need to know how to do this in a simple way. So we talk about like batch cooking, we talk about meal planning, we talk about, you know, easy finds in the supermarket for days when you just, you know, everything's gone crazy. We have a weekly question and answer session on Zoom. We're going to have a private Facebook group so we can, you know, talk in between. People can share their wins, can share recipes that they've found that have been, you know, awesome for them. And then part of the personalizing, it comes down to actually one-on-one having a conversation. So included in this 6-module program is a one-on-one session with me. Either if you live in Perth, I'm all the way over in Western Australia, but if you live in Perth, that can be in person, but we can also do that via Zoom. And that's where we start to personalize this particular program to you specifically. So that at the end of the program, you're like, this is what works for me, and this is how I know how to manage it. And that's not the end. That Facebook group will be available. We can keep, supporting after that. But, it's just a way of doing this. When I find I work one-on-one with my clients, I'm saying the same thing to them over and over. And it just really, through a conversation with you, Chelsey, I thought, well, I want to be reaching more women than just this one and this one and this one, because this is a condition that is just so underserviced, and women don't know where to turn. They think maybe low carb keto will help me, but how do I start? I'm on a couple of different Facebook groups about this condition, and I see that all the time. Like, how do I get started with keto? And you'll jump online and you'll read one thing and then another, and then you'll get confused. So this program we do this step by step. It's actually 3 stages where we do this deep sort of contract right in, make sure that we have a ketogenic experience so that how that feels for your body. Does that improve your energy? Does it improve your pain? And, all of these things. And then we expand it back out again so that we can make it sustainable and, so it works for us long term. Because that's the other thing I think you said right at the beginning, Chelsey, that, this is a big commitment if you're going to do it forever. And really what we want to be able to do is to make this as least restrictive so that we can do it long term. Because if this helps your lymphatic condition or your lipedema, then you're not just going to do this for 6 weeks and go back to what you were doing before. This is something that you would really want to be doing long term so that you can halt any more progression of those conditions and hopefully reverse them as much as you can. And the only way to do that is by being able to expand that to the point that you're quite comfortable in, that your body responds well to. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing. As an introductory price, it was going to be $379, but for all of Chelsey's BooB CamP members, I'm offering a special of $279, and that it does include that one-on-one session with me as well. So if this is something that people are interested in, I'm at this point taking what I consider to be like expressions of interest. We are going to be kicking off in a couple of weeks, but I do want to have a chat to people on the phone and just get a bit of an idea of what's going on for them. Because keto isn't right for everyone, even though I've, sat here and spoken about how beneficial it is. There's some conditions where we would want to be more selective. If someone already has a kidney disease, if they have type 1 diabetes, we need to be more cautious. Even people with type 2 diabetes that are already on medication, we would need to take the approach a little bit differently, because all of a sudden they're going to be over medicated. And so we need to work together and work out how we're going to progress with that. I wouldn't advise it for people that are pregnant or breastfeeding, just because they're going to need that high level of carbohydrates to sustain the pregnancy and to be, nourishing somebody else. So, there's some things that we would want to chat about on the phone first to see whether this is a good fit. So you can go to the website www.carriereedy.info/simply low carb. There'll be a little slot there where you can put in your name and your phone number. We'll then make a time where we can catch up and have a chat and just see whether this is something that's going to be beneficial for you.
I am putting that into Facebook now.
Awesome.
SIMPLY low carb. Okay, enter. Beautiful. So we had a couple of girls in my Body Wisdom group last night who have, they came and they spoke about how wonderful it is that they've done it before. And they've lost 30, 40 kilos eating, and doing this way. So it can be massively life-changing.
Yes.
Yeah, massively life-changing. But it is also not just for lipedema and lymphedema either. True. So I think it's a great supportive way to get those proteins up, because so many people, when I talk to them about the food pyramid, don't know really what is a fat, what is a protein, and what is a carbohydrate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess, as a nutritionist, I kind of live and breathe this. And so, it's sort of it's off the tip of my tongue, oh, that's a protein, that's a carb. But you're right. Most of us, if you're not in this industry or you've not really had to think about these things before, they're just foods.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't blame them. And, we need to have so much more good fats. The amount of dementia that we have going, and it's like up there is like number one in women's health conditions, dementia. So we have, and that is because we've been low fat.
Yeah.
We haven't had enough fat.
The other really interesting thing about dementia and Alzheimer's is, there's some groups of people that are now calling it type 3 diabetes,
yes,
and the blood sugar connection to that too. So not having enough fat and eating too many carbohydrates. And again, this is nobody's fault. We followed the advice that we were given, that food pyramid that we were told, fill up on whole grains. We just did, and I'm not saying that people that, have got these conditions of eating too much sugar. It can just be that, they've eaten these whole grains and followed all the advice that they were given at the time, but we're now coming to see that maybe it was the advice that was a little bit flawed. But
yeah, my teacher, she was amazing. She was like, okay, I'm going to teach you all of this stuff, but your exam is going to be on this. So,
yeah.
Here is what you need to know to pass the exam. But once you've done it in the exam, forget it, because it is completely wrong. But it's the way that the government is. Like, they still say 5 grains, have your 5 grains a day. And we had to do our exam on that, even though it is outdated and incorrect. Yeah. I'm glad that she taught us what we needed to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, talking about grains, one of the questions that, I often get asked is, how does eating a keto or a low carb diet impact the microbiome? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really valid question too, because in the early days we are, to bring down the level of carbohydrates, we are sort of bringing in the amount of fruits and vegetables that we're eating. We're obviously not eating those grains, and we're bringing in some of these other more healthy carbs that we're sort of limiting in the early stages. But that's why I don't stay at that point. We use that as an experiment, test it out, see how this responds, and then we try and expand out the amount of vegetables, especially, that we're eating. And we tend to continue to stick to the low carbohydrate vegetables. I mean, some are going to be better than others, but we do certainly want to expand that out so that we're not impacting the microbiome in a negative way. But I think what's interesting is that our bodies have needs for protein. Bodies could not, cope without any protein. They can't cope without fat. But there are certainly groups of people, and science has validated this, that they thrive even without any carbohydrates. So we know that we're not doing something that's going to damage the body, because we're focusing on those other things. And then, like I say, I use a process where we expand it back out again, yes, so that we can eat as many as we can, because they're great. Veggies are so good for us for so many different reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. Last questions, ladies. We've got so Odette has just said, yeah, so true. Okay, Grace, yeah, we've explained a little bit more about the hair test there. You can click on the link, and Joan can also tag you in one of the hair test information sessions that we've done on there. So waiting on the any last calls, but we've explained so much here. People need to be aware of their blood sugars. Okay, really be aware of that. Be aware of, you drink a can, you get a can of no sugar Coke or whatever it's called, no sugar, something like that. And you have a look and you go, okay, let me see here. If there's 3 food groups, there's fat, there's protein, and there's sugar, carbohydrates. You have a look at your can of zero, that's what it's called, your can of zero. Is it full of fat? No. Is there some meat in it? No, it's all sugar, it's all sugar. And just because it's made of chemicals that our body doesn't recognize as sugar, and our body can't metabolize properly, that's how they can get away with saying that it's, zero sugar, because it's chemicals that are going in. So people, I just want them to be aware of, when you see something that says no sugar or zero sugar, well, is it full of fat? No, because it's liquid. It's not, solid. Is there any protein? No. So just use some common sense. Okay, so we've got some. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, very informative. Great. Yeah, everyone said thank you so much.
Oh, it's been so much fun. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And that's what we want to do. So that's what we're both about in healthcare, is empowering people to make better choices.
Absolutely.
Giving them some information, something to think about, because this might be something that they're going, oh, wow, like that's my mum, or that's my sister, or that lady at work, who has always, tried so hard. I can give her some information now on, on what may help her, because we love helping.
Absolutely. And we need to share this message because there's just not enough support. Otherwise, people don't know where to turn. And so just having some sort of source of information is really beneficial.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we might leave it there. And this Zoom recording we will keep in BooB CamP.
Great.
People can tag. So once it's done, Joan will edit some stuff off the front and some stuff, off the back if we need to. And she can add the slides in as well. And I'm sure Joan, she can also put it onto YouTube, and we can get the message out. So the special that you've got is only up until the end of the month.
Yes. So ready for this next group that's running. Yeah, for sure.
So if you are watching the replay of this video, this is the special that is up just to the end of the month. So if you're watching afterwards, still reach out to Carrie, because, she's going to have another group going too.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
Okay, everybody. Yeah, big eye opener for me. Thank you. So yeah, lots more comments coming through.
Yeah, great. Thanks, everyone. I really hope that you found something of benefit out of this.
And our next BooB CamP is on the 30th of August is where we start BooB CamP. So Monday night, all of the information, education on the lymphatic system, why it's super important. Oh, it's the other side. Why you don't want to end up like Lizzie here with your cells bathing in all that toxic mess. Day 2 is action. We take you through all of the routine, how to incorporate your gloves. And it's a kick up the bum for those of you who haven't been doing your routine. You get out of sequence. We get every month we do BooB CamP, and for the newbies, I teach you how to use the spiky side, how to use the balls, and then how to use your cream. And then night 3, so that will be on the 1st of September. What a beautiful way to start spring with the gorgeous Nick top. So if you are in my Body Wisdom group, you will know Nick is our go-to for stress and anxiety. She's our cool cat. She will be doing day 3 BooB CamP on the 1st of September, offering, just like we've done now, lots of advice on coping with different situations and being able to be your best. Cool. All right, everybody, good night. I love you, and we will see any more questions, just pop them in. So if you are on replay, pop in the questions, and Carrie will be able to jump on and answer those too.
Yep. Awesome. Cool.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.